God's spiritual work by Rabbi Michael-ben-Pesach Portnaar. Lesson 35, concerning the vitality of Kedusha. The verse says, Psalms 104, "Yonder sea, great and wide, therein are creeping things, innumerable, living creatures, both small and great." We should interpret the sea as the sea of Sitra Achra. Great and wide means that it manifests itself and cries, "Give, give," referring to the great vessels of reception. Living creatures means that there are upper lights there. Which one steps and tramples on with one's feet. Innumerable, that they are small with large animals, meaning whether one has small livelihood or whether he has a great livelihood. It is all in that sea. It is so because there is a rule that from above they give the giving and take. They do not take. All that is given from above is not received in return, but it stays below. Hence, if one extends something from above and then blemishes it, it remains below, but not with man. Instead, it falls to the sea of the Esa, the other side. In other words, if one extends some luminescence and cannot sustain it permanently because one's kelim, vessels, are not yet clean to be fit for the light, meaning that one will receive it in vessels of bestowal, like the light that comes from the giver. The luminescence must depart from him. At that time, this luminescence falls into the hands of the Esa, the other side, for several times. It means that one extends, and then it departs from him, and hence the illuminations increase in the sea of the Esa, the other side. This is so until the cup is full, meaning after one finds the full measure of the effort, that one can find the other side. Esa gives him everything she had taken into her own authority in return, by way of, "He hath swallowed down riches, and he shall vomit them." Follows that all the Esa had taken into her own authority was only as a deposit, meaning as long as she had command over the man. The whole matter of the dominion that she has is so that there will be room for one to scrutinize one's vessels of reception and permeate them into Kedusha, sanctity. In other words, had it not governed a person, one would sell for little, and then one's vessels of reception would remain separated. Thus, one would never be able to gather all the kelim, vessels, that belong to the root of one's soul, instill them into Kedusha, and extend the light that belongs to him. Hence, it is a correction that each time one extends anything and has a descendant, he must begin anew, meaning new scrutinizes. What one had from the past has fallen into the Esa, and she holds it in her authority as a deposit, and afterwards one receives everything that she received from him during this whole time. Yet we must also know, if one had been able to sustain any luminescence, even a small one, had it been permanent, one would have been considered whole. In other words, one would have been able to move forward with his luminescence. Hence, if one loses the luminescence, one should regret it. It is like a person who places a seed in the ground so a big tree would grow from it, but took the seed out of the ground right away. So what is in the ground? Moreover, we can say he not only took out the seed from the ground and corrupted it, we can say he dug out the tree with ripe fruits out of the ground and corrupted them. It is the same here. If one had not lost this tiny luminescence, a great light would have grown from it. It follows it is not necessarily that he had lost the power of a small luminescence, but it is as though a great light indeed was lost for him. We must know it is a rule that one cannot live without livelihood and pleasure, since it stems from the root of creation, which is his desire to do good to his creatures. Hence, every creature cannot exist without livelihood and pleasure, and therefore every creature must go and look for a place from which it can receive delight and pleasure. The pleasure is received in 3 times: in the past, in the present, and in the future. However, the principal reception of pleasure is in the present, although we see that one receives pleasure from the past, and from the future too. They shine in the present. Therefore, if one does not find a sensation of pleasure in the present, one receives livelihood from the past, and he can tell the others how he was happy in past times. One can receive sustenance from that in the present, or picture for oneself that he hopes in the future he will be happy. However, the measurement of the sensation of the pleasure from the past and the future depends on the extent to which they shine for one in the present. We must know this applies both to corporeal pleasures as well as to spiritual pleasures. As we see, even when one works in corporeality, the order is that during the work one is unhappy because he exerts himself. All that one can extend in the work is only because the future shines for him, when he receives the pay for his work. It shines for a person in the present, and thus one is able to continue the work. However, if one is unable to picture the reward he will receive in the future, one must take pleasure from the future, not from the reward he will receive for his work in the future. It means that he will not enjoy the reward, but he will not have affliction from the exertion. This is what he enjoys now, in the present, what he will have in the future. The future shines for him in the present. Soon the work will be over, meaning the time when he must work, and he will receive rest. Thus, the pleasure of rest that one will ultimately receive still shines for him. In other words, one's profit will be that he will not be afflicted by what he now feels from the work, and this gives him the strength to be able to work now. If one is unable to picture for oneself that soon he will be rid of the torments he suffers now, one will come to despair and sadness, and that state can bring one to take one's life. This is why our sages said, one who takes one's life has no part in the next world, because he denies providence, that the Creator leads the world in a form of good that doeth good. Instead, one should believe these situations come to him because above they wanted to bring one tikkun, correction, meaning one will gather reminiscence from these situations so he will be able to understand the conduct of the world more intensely and more strongly. These situations are called achoraim, posterior. When one prevails these situations, one is awarded the discernment of panim, anterior, meaning that the light shines into these achoraim. There is a rule: one cannot live if one has no place from which to receive delight and pleasure. Thus, when one is unable to receive from the present, one must still receive sustenance from the past or from the future. In other words, the body seeks sustenance for itself in every means at its disposal. If one does not agree to receive sustenance from the past or from the future while in that state, then the body has no choice but to agree to receive sustenance from the spiritual things because it has no other choice. Hence, it must agree to receive delight and pleasure from vessels of bestowal, since it is impossible to live without sustenance. It follows, when one is used to keep the Torah and the mitzvot, and lo lishma, not for her name, meaning receive reward for one's work, one has an ability to picture receiving some reward later on, and one can already work at the expense of the delight and pleasure he will receive afterwards. However, if one works not in order to be rewarded, but wants to work without any reward, how can one picture for oneself having anything from which to receive sustenance? After all, one cannot create any picture because he has nothing to go for. Hence, in lo lishma, there is no necessity to give sustenance from above, since one has sustenance from the picture of the future. Only necessity is given from above, not luxury. Hence, if one wants to work only for the Creator and has no wish whatsoever to take sustenance for other things, there is no other counsel, but he must be given sustenance from above. This is so because one demands only the necessity to go on living, and then one receives sustenance from the side of the structure of the holy divinity. It is as our sages wrote, anyone who is saddened for the public is awarded, and sees the comfort of the public. The public is called the holy divinity, because a public means a collective, meaning the assembly of Israel, since Malchut is the collection of all the souls. Since one does not want any reward for oneself, but wants to work for the Creator, this is called rising divinity from the dust. So it will not be so lowered. It means that there is no desire to work for the Creator. Everything one sees will produce benefit for oneself. From that one has fuel for work. What concerns the benefit of the Creator, and what reward he will receive in return? The body objects to this work because it renders one a taste of dust. When one wants to work for the Creator, but the body resists, and one asks of the Creator to give him power to be able to work, to raise divinity from the dust, one is awarded the appearance of the face of the Creator, and the concealment is lifted from him. Lesson 35, continued. 35a, concerning the vitality of Kedusha. When first a person from above wakes up, and then violate the vitality of the deity in small and large conditions, and a person preserves, the vitality doesn't ascend to the source, it stays below. It exists further as an unclean force, an unclean force of egoism in that person. This means when a person receives light, but he is not in the situation to hold on constantly. In other words, his wishes aren't yet corrected to become one with the light. He can't receive the light with the intention of the giving. The light will then remove itself, and he comes in his unclean wishes. This will happen several times before he has filled himself with the light. This will only happen when a person makes a complete effort. Please refer to the table at the end of the lesson in the written materials from 4 columns. What to correct, with what, result, and result and goal. Be well until the next